Did you know that Spotlight On is completely self-funded by the team that produces it? We're looking for ways to keep the podcast self-sufficient without sacrificing the listener experience or the integrity of the show. The best way we could think of was to ask for the support of our listeners. Please consider making a donation to help cover our annual operating expenses. Go to spotlightonpodcast.com and click the word donate. If you can, please do. And if you cannot, please continue to enjoy the show. We're happy to have you as a listener. Thanks. Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast featuring musicians, writers, innovators, and ideas shaping music, arts, entertainment, and culture. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today the spotlight shines on Greg Lisher, a guitarist best known for alternative rock who's leaned hard into electronic music. Greg made his name playing with Camper von Beethoven and the Monks of Doom, but during the pandemic, he sat down at a keyboard and started exploring new sonic territory. The result? Underwater Detection Method, a collection of instrumental pieces that blend synthesizers with live strings and drums. It's an album that started as digital sketches and grew into something much more organic as Greg learned to play piano and brought real musicians into the mix. Greg's here to share how stepping outside his comfort zone led to some of his most adventurous music yet. And now, Greg Lisher. Trying to think of other artists who sort of mastered one form and sort of began again in another style or another form.
Yes.
I was thinking about David Lynch. He's gone from film and visual art to music.
Yeah. Yes.
Joni Mitchell is a good one, guitar and painting.
Yes.
What's your experience been like? What is it? A exhilaration? Is it a new form of expression? What's it like to have such proficiency and such identification with one sort of area within music, and then to take the leap on these last two records into something quite new?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So basically, I kind of look at my solo records as an opportunity to do things that I can't do in my other bands. I did my first two solo records, kind of singer-songwriter based. And so after the second one of me doing that, I thought maybe it was time to try something different. I put the vocals aside and I wanted to just focus on the music. For some reason, when I was doing the singer-songwriter thing, I was singing and playing, singing a melody, playing a chord progression. If you took my singing out and the melody out, the music didn't, I was feeling like I wanted more from the music side of things. And so that's when I did my last solo record, and I just really decided, Songs from the Period Garden, I decided to really just do an experiment, just put the singer-songwriting thing aside and just try an instrumental record and just move in a totally different direction. And the majority of that record, I'd already, I've been doing demos for years, right? I had a bunch of 4-track demos. And so I met up with the other guitar player in one of my bands, the Monks of Doom, David Emmergluck. He's in the Counting Crows. He's kind of like my musical confidant. I told him what I was interested in doing, and I gave him all the songs, and he was really interested in producing the record. We started that one, 2010, and then we were finishing it up in 2012. And as we were finishing that up, but before I was able to get it out, I got this Reason software, and all of a sudden I had the ability to kind of access to synthesizers and a bunch of electronic tools.
Okay.
I felt like there was another opportunity for me to keep learning, and I just couldn't stop myself. I just all of a sudden wanted to just keep going, keep learning, had all the stuff I wanted to learn, just tried to keep focusing on moving forward and trying to learn as much as I can. And then there was the pandemic, and then there was all these things that happened that provided opportunities for me to even focus more on just my own musical creativity or my own learning as a musician. And I just figured out it's like a bunch of downtime. Now's the time to do this. Because if one of my bands, if Camper starts up again and we start playing shows and start touring, then the opportunities for me to do my own thing goes away, if that makes any sense.
Sure. You have to schedule more and plan more.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like for me to be able to learn the things that I want to do, I kind of have to do that on my own. You know what I mean? That's kind of the story, how that started. Yeah.
When you talk about the learning process, is there a lot of experimentation in that, both with the tools themselves as well as the compositions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been able to kind of like maybe fool around and come up with a piano part or idea to one of my songs, but I didn't know how to play keyboards. I didn't know anything about synthesizers. I had skills in programming drum machines because I used to do that a long time ago when I was doing these 4-track demos for my singer-songwriter stuff. I was always good at putting stuff together. This was like a whole new world. So all of a sudden, I'm making a keyboard-based record with synthesizers, and I don't know how to play keyboards, and I don't know how to program synthesizers. So it's like,
Kind of punk rock.
yeah, I figured it was like, wow, this is just like a cliff that I felt like I wanted to dive off of. You get kind of punk rock in a third way, I guess. But it's like I wanted to learn. I did it because I wanted to understand how to do things in this realm of making music. I was just like, now's my opportunity. Let's dig in. Well, when I was creating these songs, there were no demos because everything was just started from scratch. I never knew where anything was going to go. The whole thing started as scrolling through sounds, different sounds that were like presets, and started to find sounds that I was attracted to. And those sounds, they made me play a certain way, they made me write a certain way. They just kind of drove my mind in whatever direction that would be. And then I was like programming drum patterns and coming up with bass lines and melodies and chord progressions, and just started putting things together. And also I was like, I purchased a book on how to use Reason. And I went through this book from like top to bottom. And it has you do some exercises that are kind of examples of how to use things to get you going. And I was using these exercises to get myself started. And as I started using these exercises, I started coming up with my own ideas and stuff. And it's kind of a weird way of working.
That's really incredible.
So anyway, as I started putting these songs together, working with these sounds, coming up with these ideas, putting these sections that would get arranged into songs, I started doing all this stuff. I started learning how to use the software. I started learning how to program synthesizers, and I started learning how to play keyboards. At a certain point in the process, I thought probably be a good idea for me to take some piano lessons. So I did. I got a piano teacher, started taking piano lessons. It was a real growth explosion for me.
As someone who has played guitar for so long, what was that experience? Was it revelatory? What did the piano teach you? Not necessarily learning the piano, but what did the piano itself reveal to you?
It just helped me get a better understanding of keyboards and using keyboards as a tool for songwriting. That's what it really revealed. And, the funny thing is that like I started taking piano lessons. It's like, I don't think I've ever written a song on the piano.
Yeah.
Usually I just use that so that I could apply that to when I was working with all these software synthesizers. And so it really helped. And also when I first started this record, because I couldn't play keyboards, I was working within the MIDI sequencer and I was drawing out a lot of notes and I was doing a lot of cutting and pasting to put arrangements together. And I was doing a lot of things that I'd never really worked that way before. I'd used Pro Tools before and I knew I could edit things and cut and paste and create arrangements. But this was because I didn't have a lot of skills on the keyboards. It was very visual and I was really writing stuff out. There was such a big visual aspect to everything I was doing. But it was funny, as the record continued and I started taking lessons and I started being able to play. Before we mixed the record, I went back and ended up playing everything by hand.
Oh, interesting.
I just kind of redid everything and it's like going to school.
So really the sequencer recordings in their own way served as demos.
Yes, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, exactly. You're absolutely right. So I guess I just went back and kind of refined stuff.
There's something so fascinating about the idea of, especially with, the synthesizers married to the sequencer, of being able to play things that you wouldn't be able to play or being able to create music that you wouldn't be able to play.
Yes.
I can't articulate it, but there's a profundity in that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The sequencers provide, that's a cool tool to be able to create a lot of stuff that it's exactly what you're talking about.
If you didn't take the piano lessons and you went back and listened to the sequencer versions of the tracks, would you have released those?
Yeah. I mean, they weren't really, it ended up not being super far off from what I had originally. But it's when you're drawing MIDI notes, I noticed like a lot of times I would draw chords just right up to the next chord. And then when I went back to play it for real, there would be this space from the time it took me to pick up my hand to get to the next chord. When I started playing everything, that's what really changed. Like all of a sudden there started becoming all this air and space. And, when you lay your fingers down on a chord, not every finger comes down exactly at the same time as the other fingers. And so it's like, I think when I started, everything was very, very quantized and rigid and square. Everything was square and like almost computer-like.
To the grid.
Yeah. So by the time I was able to get back into it, it was like I knew what the music already sounded like. I just wanted it to sound human and not just constructed in a computer, because I just love, even though I didn't have, when I started, as a keyboard player, but I am a player regardless, guitar, bass, I play stuff, So that's where my heart's at. And that's where my ultimate goal was, to just really try to get the skills to be able to play stuff,
It's really interesting, the idea of where the humanity meets the technology, and not to necessarily over philosophize about it, but it's a conversation that I've had here with other artists, specifically in regards to, the early years of synthesizer music, or what we might identify, sort of mid 70s to mid 80s.
Yeah.
Before everything went really digital and completely MIDI controlled.
Sure.
The reason we go back to a lot of that music, or that it resonates still, is that analog aspect of it, and the fact that you still had to play the synthesizers as opposed to them being totally programmed. And the more people like you that I talk to, and I hear these stories of wanting to bring the humanity into the technology-driven music, that thesis resonates more and more for me, that those two together are really where the secret sauce lies.
Yeah, I'm with you. Software is great for being able to mock things up. I can mock up a drum kit and get an idea of how I would want a real drummer to play on the song, or what I would imagine the drums doing on the recording. Or if I wanted to, say, create like kind of arrange a string part or something, I could use string samples. I could mock that up. There's just all this, there's so much of it is kind of a means to an end in a certain way, because I start by mocking things up. But then what I end up doing is getting real musicians to replace whatever I programmed on the drums most of the time. But I still like drum machine, and I still like combining the two elements of real drums and drum machine. Like I would never get a real drummer to play like a drum machine, and I would never use a drum machine to sound like a real drummer. You know what I mean? It's like
it's its own instrument. It's its own sound. Yeah.
It's its own instrument. They all have their own strengths and stuff like that. And so the same thing with, I was able to get this guy down in Southern California to take the arrangements I came up with using these string samples, and he played the whole thing. He played all the parts himself with the viola and cello and violin. And so at the end of the day, the only thing that was left on the recordings really was the software synthesizers. And then I added guitar. I was talked into adding a lot of the real instruments. Originally, I just wanted to keep it all just software, just completely. But as I kind of went on and I started learning and I started interfacing with other people, and people started saying, hey, what about doing this? And I was like, I hadn't thought of that. We started adding some of the drums on the record. And then immediately I thought, I should add real bass to this and double all the bass synth lines with real bass, because that's just going to make it warmer and fatter, and so as we started doing all this stuff, the record just started blooming. And then originally I didn't really want to play guitar. And one of my friends, who's kind of a mentor to me and is a producer engineer, he said, man, it's like, why sell yourself short? You could benefit from adding yourself as a player into this.
Oh, really?
And so that's what happened. And this mentor that I'm talking about, his name is Bruce Cappan. He's a really great pedal steel player. He plays many instruments. He's known for pedal steel. He's a producer. He mixes, and he has a studio that's about just an hour away from me. I went to him and I said, I've got this idea. I'm doing this project and I really want to learn how to mix, because that was something else I really wanted to do. And he had a lot of experience. He's done a lot of film soundtracks and scores and stuff. And he knew he'd worked with a lot of MIDI before. Yeah, he was like, I think I know what you want to do. I've got a lot of experience with a lot of the stuff that I think you want to learn, and I'd love to help you. So that was another part of this whole thing, was working with him.
We'll be back with more Spotlight On and Greg Lisher right after this break.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonearm.com, our new online journal covering unexpected music and culture. This week on The Tone Arm, Jamie Baum talks about how she combines poetry with the flute in her jazz septet in her latest work. Guitarist Dave Brown and drummer Adam Golubiewski dig deep into improvised music on the album Dog's Light. Sao Paulo producer Zé Negro discusses musical productions inspired by the waterfalls and bird songs of Brazil. And Lawrence Purrier commemorates the podcast's 5th anniversary by looking back at the second year of Spotlight On. You'll find all this and more on The Tone Arm. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter. That's thetonearm.com. The Tone Arm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.
And now, back to Spotlight On. I'm curious to revisit something you said earlier in the conversation. You mentioned your first 2 solo albums being more in the singer-songwriter vein. And I'm really curious how working without lyrics allows you to express meaning and intent. How do you think about, I guess the word would be narrative, or how do you think about meaning in the absence of lyrics?
That was one of the reasons why I wanted to try and making some records doing instrumental music, because I knew that there was a challenge that was sitting there for me to kind of jump on. Coming up with song titles is really hard, because there's no lyrical content. So it's almost like sometimes I'd just have to use my imagination to see. It's like looking at a painting or something in a museum. Go, what does this make you think of? That makes me think of that. Okay, well, maybe I'll come up with,
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's key. I feel like you spend a lot of time trying to make sure you're keeping the listener interested in what's going on. So you have to constantly kind of work really hard to keep changing things and keep things interesting. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, that was, for me, it was like, well, you take the lyrics and the vocals out of a song and then it automatically gets filled up with something else. And the other thing too, it's even though I'm making this kind of electronic music, my roots still lie in traditional music. So it's like this record, there's still chord progressions, there's still melodies, there's still drum patterns, there's still bass lines.
Yeah, it's not just soundscapes or anything like that.
It's not just sound. So I'm trying to kind of merge everything, because I'm a really big fan of some artists that make some records that are much more abstract than what I do. I don't see that as being exactly what I do. I'm interested in it, but it's like, yeah, somehow
Slightly less nihilistic, I would say.
Yeah, in some ways. I was kind of curious when this record came out, because for the people that know me for what I do, whether it's playing guitar in Camper Van Beethoven or the Monks of Doom or doing all this other stuff, And I was thinking like, oh, these people, I'm kind of curious how they're going to react to it or what they're going to think of. Because I was thinking they probably don't know a lot of the music that I'm into or that I was listening to when I made this. So I was kind of curious like what they were going to say. Some people were like, oh yeah, like Tangerine Dream. Or then someone else was like, oh, this is Greg Lisher's Kid A, like the Radiohead record. And I thought, oh, okay. All right. I hadn't seen that one coming, but that makes total sense.
Yeah, your reference points.
Yes. And it's funny too, because synthesizers have, especially in the 70s, they have a role in rock music and they have a role in prog music. And so I feel like my other band, The Monks of Doom, we were touching off on a lot of prog. There was a lot of prog influences. Not necessarily from me, but some of the other members of the band. But I feel like when I did this record, I feel like I took prog influences, came into this.
Guy takes a few piano lessons and now he's Keith Emerson.
I know, right? Never. I'd never be able to do anything like that.
That's fun though.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's like I love dub so it's like I feel like I was trying to grab elements of dub, progressive music, really into like British art rock, all these different genres and see what I would end up making, not knowing what I was doing and just trying to create my own messed up version of this music. I mean, that's what I did.
You're adding to the canon. You're adding to the lineage.
Exactly.
I'm so curious about the role of song titles in instrumental music. And you talked a little bit about how you approach them and how you arrive at them.
Yes.
Do you ever do you have a notebook with a list of potential titles, or does a title ever come up to you while you're working on a song? It's just a peculiarity of mine that I find it so interesting.
I have a list that I have like on the Notes app on my phone that I've been running for years. And I've got 300 song titles that I just come up with things in my head. I'm walking around, I come up with it. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. So that happens a lot. And then like other times, none of those titles will fit. I have to come up with something else. Some of this music may make me feel a certain way, remind me of something I've done. Or if I can't draw from personal experiences, then I just have to use my imagination and see what I come up with. Yeah.
On Songs from the Imperial Garden, I feel as though whether or not it's an explicit concept, there's sort of some motifs that sort of conjure Eastern music and Chinese or Japanese sounds and melody.
Yes.
I'm curious on this record, again, noting some of the song titles.
Yes.
There's this feeling of space and time or distance and movement. I'm curious, am I onto a concept there? Was this in your mind, or is this just retrofitting?
It wasn't, I didn't have a concept. So it's funny that the illusion of depth. So that's funny. So I was in an art supply store and I was looking through some kind of book like on how to draw. And they have this chapter called The Illusion of Depth, where you're using shadows. And I said, that's a great song title. So I pulled out my phone and I threw that in my notes. Finding the Future, that was one of those songs where it's like, I just had to close my eyes and think about, let this music just kind of speak to me and inform my imagination to come up with an idea. And I thought it kind of fits.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you present this music live?
I would love to, but right now I don't have any way to do it. I don't really have a band to do it. So right now it's just kind of a studio project. I have a whole nother record that's basically an addendum to this underwater detection method. That's basically all ready to go. I just need to get the drums on it, get my bass, get the guitar, and mix it. So I have another record just sitting in the wings. So I want to move forward. And like I said, it's kind of like an addendum to underwater detection method, except it touches off on kind of electronic subgenres that I didn't touch off on this record. So this new record, yeah, there's some stuff that sounds a little more kind of industrial. There's some kind of stuff that sounds a little more gothy. I don't know if goth is the right word, but a little darker. So
Might be right for our times.
yeah, exactly. Oh, just in time. Exactly. 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. The soundtrack to 2025.
Soundtrack to, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I would just love to get this record finished and get it out. And I'd love to get it out next year. I'm just trying to get on a program where I can just really make a record and try to get it out every year, or as close as I can, So all this time, from the time I did songs from the Imperial Garden and then doing this underwater detection method, making that, learning all the stuff, I just spent so much time just learning. I didn't have the skills to do what I wanted. I was just trying to learn and experiment in the process of learning to try to gain all these skills. And I'm still always learning, but now I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing and how to do it. So now I feel like I can start moving forward, hopefully, and getting this stuff out.
Yeah, I think people don't realize, or certainly listeners may not realize, that in addition to learning the tool, in addition to writing the songs, there's also sort of like the workflow component.
Yes.
You sit down and it's what happens when you're, it's just, there's a production element. I guess a production element that has to be thought through.
Absolutely. And a lot of times nothing happens when you sit down and work. I don't know. You just have to, you have to constantly be doing it to find things or get things that you like.
Are you workman-like that way? Do you carve out time and you say, okay, I'm going to go to the studio and work for 6 hours? Or
I mean, it's like my home studio is just like in my living room. So it's like, it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't always feel like it. Sometimes I think I feel like it. And then I open it up and I'm like, not feeling it. Other times I'll just wake up in the morning. I've got this idea and I'll just force myself to work. But one thing I've learned is never throw anything away. A lot of times I'll spend a lot of time working on something that I'm really liking. I come back and listen to it. I think it's terrible. A lot of times I spend a lot of time working on something only to just get dismayed and be like, this is not working. I'm going to give up on this. And I come back and listen to that. I'm like, no, that's good. And you just have to keep doing it. And a lot of times I need that space away because I'm just working by myself, to get the stuff started and rolling before I can work with other people. I got to put it all together myself. And so it's like, I need to be able to get objectivity. You know what I mean? I have to be able to step away from it, work hard on something. And then I get in my car and I try to listen to other artists and other music or classical music or jazz or whatever to try to get to cleanse my palate so that when I come back, I can look at things with having some objectivity, and then I can really figure out what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
And what I need to take away or what I need to add or all that stuff.
Do you know anything about how the fans of your other bands receive your solo music? Do you look for or do you receive any feedback from them?
Yeah. So, I mean, with this new record, it was such a departure from anything I've done. So obviously I wanted my existing fans or fans of the bands that I play in to come along, please come along for the ride. I hope you like it. There was part of me that was unsure if it would be accepted or if they would like it, because it's just so different from anything I've done. And it's so different from anything I've been involved in.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like I'm trying to get my foot in the door in this whole other market, which is the electronic music market. And I'm really interested in that, but I don't have, I'm not involved in any kind of scene. And I don't really know I don't personally know at this point in time, a lot of people that are doing that. A lot of people do that, but I'm not connected with any of that stuff. So I'm kind of in a weird place, it's like, I'm not sure, wasn't real, when I put this record out, I wasn't sure if the people that had liked what I'd done in the past would like it. And at the same time, I feel like I was just trying to get my foot into this other door and see if I can get these people to listen to this music, which is more what they listen to already.
Do you seek or do you have any aspiration to have collaborators in this space? A rock band I think of as so highly collaborated. Even if somebody has one vision for the music,
yes,
you still need the other players.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested in that because I've been just working by myself so much. That was kind of intentional because I was just trying to learn how to put everything together and learn how to use all the tools and learn how to mix, learn how to play keyboards, learn how to program and do all that stuff. And I needed that space on my own to be able to do that. Now, I'm still learning, but I feel like I've gotten to a point where it's like, now I would love to work with other people. And because I just think that's one of the coolest aspects of music is being able to collaborate with other people.
Thank you so much, Greg Lisher. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. Spotlight On is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Q-Burn's Abstract Message. The most important member of our team is you. Thank you for supporting our work. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and then visit us online at spotlightonpodcast.com. There you'll find our free episode archive, our online store, and a link to make a donation to support our work. Thanks for listening. Be safe and stay in touch.